Every 40 seconds, someone loses their life to suicide.
Today is World Mental Health Day, and this year's theme focuses on suicide prevention. The World Health Organization is launching the 40 Seconds of Action campaign to raise awareness on the scale of suicide across the world and the role that each of us can play to help prevent it.
It is also a day to unite in efforts to improve the mental health of people around the world. There are renewed calls for an improvement in suicide prevention strategies and a reduction in the stigma associated with suicides.
Joining us now is a mental health advocate, Toluche Francis. Thank you for joining us on TVC Breakfast.
Thank you for having me.
Every 40 seconds, someone loses their life to suicide. How worrisome is this trend?
It's very worrisome because you can imagine that means as you're speaking right now, someone is taking his or her life. And if you look at the population, let's even just take our locality alone. If every 40 seconds someone is dying by suicide, then that means before you blink an eye, perhaps hundreds are gone. You know, and that tells you that it's not something to joke with, it's not something to underestimate or underrate. And it calls for serious action, serious sensitization, serious education as well. I think it also calls for serious care from every one of us, so that we care for our neighbors, we care for our friends and colleagues. We don't just play to the gallery certain signs and things that we hear them say.
All right, there has been some level of awareness over the years. How effective would you say these awareness campaigns and all the efforts are when you pitch them against the number of or the rate of suicide around?
I think it's been somewhat effective in terms of educating people, but the challenge here is what are the factors that bring people to that point where they conclude that, look, life is no longer worth living, let me leave this world. Have those factors changed? Have things gotten better? Perhaps not. So we can keep talking and talking and talking, but if the things around the people who are involved doesn't get better, the economy doesn't get better, the healthcare system doesn't get better, people are not sure that when they come out to speak, they're not going to be stigmatized, it doesn't change anything. So we keep talking, people have been talking, people are hearing, but when it comes to action, what exactly is being done? What are the factors around them that encourages this? Have they stopped? How suicide is being reported? Has it changed? So these factors have contributed a whole lot to the number rather than the advocacy and the talks that are going around.
So I'll pick it up from the point of if the factors that, make these people commit suicide, has it improved or not? If it hasn't, how would a 40-second video change their mindset?
So the 40 seconds video is to call on governments to improve funding for mental health. So imagine if I can walk into a primary health center, right, and my mental and emotional well-being is being checked. I don't have to call a psychiatrist, I don't have to call a therapist or a psychologist. There's a primary health center very close to my house. I feel burdened emotionally. Can I walk in there and talk to someone and get the necessary counseling and help that I need? There's a call for universal health coverage. Do we have HMOs who cover your psychosocial and psychological needs, that each time I walk into a hospital, they take care of that? When someone walks in the hospital and talks about headache, can the medic ask out about the emotional well-being? How are you feeling? What's up with you? All these things are some of the factors that needs to play in for this to reduce. All right, so the call for the 40 seconds video is to call on governments all over the world to improve funding. When there's improved funding for mental health services, then you can get those services from the practitioners who are supposed to take care of that. So it's a call to governments all over the world that, look, we need to include funding, we need to add more funding in terms of health and mental health in particular.
All right. Toluche Francis, thank you very much for coming on the program.
Thank you for having me.
Right. Every 40 seconds, someone loses their life to suicide.
Today is World Mental Health Day, and this year's theme focuses on suicide prevention. The World Health Organization is launching the 40 Seconds of Action campaign to raise awareness on the scale of suicide across the world and the role that each of us can play to help prevent it.
It is also a day to unite in efforts to improve the mental health of people around the world. There are renewed calls for an improvement in suicide prevention strategies and a reduction in the stigma associated with suicide. Joining me now is a mental health advocate, Tolucia Francis. It's good to have you join us right now.
Thank you, sir.
Now, make us understand the understanding of mental health from the general public and to a professional. It seems to be different, what we see as mental health. But make us understand what really constitutes mental health.
All right, so when we talk about mental health, a lot of times we just take mental health as mental health. But mental health constitutes that state of mind, that perfect state of mind or health mentally in terms of your mental well-being, your emotional well-being and the like. So we have mental health problems, you have mental disorders, we have mental illnesses. Now mental disorders could fall into a spectrum. For example, obsessive compulsive disorder, the OCD that a lot of people talk about, is a disorder that has several classes under it. Okay. So when you have disorder, it means that it is beyond just one particular illness, as it were. Now, when you have mental health problems, some could be emotional. So for example, you could have depression, anxiety, and the likes. All right. Now, when you have mental illnesses, you begin to have those like schizophrenia, multiple personality disorder, and the like. So people need to understand that when we talk about mental health, we're talking about just the same way we talk about public health that involves you being healthy in terms of physically, public health. Malaria would come under public health and so on. So when it comes to mental health, it's about that stable state of your mental well-being, your mental balance, as it
But
is.
in a society like ours, where we find ourselves hustling for so many things that are societal, that are social, that are sometimes even cultural and political issues up and down, is there any perfect state when it comes to
One should ask.
Exactly,
Actually.
one should ask, because we find ourselves in different situations every day.
Well, so there are two keys that I share with people, even when I have therapy clients, and one is we must build resilience within ourselves. All right, that before anything happens, build that resilience within yourself. And one way to also build resilience is have that good social currency, have good people around you that you can speak with, that when things happen, you can talk to them. If you don't have that family that you can always run back to, have those friends who have your back. The other one is forgiveness. I talk about forgiveness a lot because when you forgive ahead, it gives you the opportunity to, as much as possible, swallow things when they happen. All right, because you've already told yourself that, hey,
It's a tough,
that is key.
Swallow.
Yeah, but it's
That
tough.
is key.
It's
tough,
key, but it's tough.
But it's easier
Yeah.
than the burden you would carry when you refuse to let go.
Okay.
Okay.
Maybe we have to lash on that and then take that home as forgiveness.
Mike, let it go.
No, I don't even have it. Thank you very much, Tolucia Francis,
Thank you
for
so
coming.
much. All right,
Thank
thank
you.
you.
Right.
Every 40 seconds, someone loses their life to suicide.
Today is World Mental Health Day, and this year's theme focuses on suicide prevention. The World Health Organization is launching the 40 Seconds of Action campaign to raise awareness on the scale of suicide across the world and the role that each of us can play to help prevent it.
It is also a day to unite in efforts to improve the mental health of people around the world. There are renewed calls for an improvement in suicide prevention strategies and a reduction in the stigma associated with suicide. Joining us now is a mental health advocate, Tolucia Francis. Good morning. Thank you for joining us on TVC
Glad to have
Breakfast.
you join us.
All right, a report says about 60 million Nigerians are suffering from mental health challenges, and we have just about 200 psychiatrists. How does this compound the challenge of trying to find solution to issues of mental health challenge?
I don't even know where to begin.
You have to start from somewhere.
Because so it's quite challenging, all right, because if you go to these facilities, these mental health facilities, you even realize that they are crowded, all right, because one, people want to go to the federal established institutions because of the cost of treatment. Okay, the private ones seem expensive, but like I tell people, healthcare is expensive everywhere. I think another thing is people need to also start looking at psychologists and psychotherapists as probably an option. Well, not an option per se, because they can actually handle certain things. You know,
Or maybe as partners, as to say.
yeah, rather than running straight to see a psychiatrist. I feel that some of the mental health problems that it takes to psychiatrists can actually be handled by clinical psychologists or therapists. Because, I mean, so if you look at the number of psychiatrists that we have, the 200, and take it back to the emigration of doctors from the country. So you can imagine that. So at the end of the day, it falls on one side of the profession. Whether you're a psychiatrist or you're an O&G specialist, the fact remains that doctors are leaving the country. All right, and whether we like or not, we are looking at psychiatrists today. We look at generally medical practitioners that we have. There is a decline in number because they are leaving. So at the end of the day, we find ourselves in this kind of mess where you don't have enough hands to take care of people who need attention. It's quite disheartening and painful, really, that we are in that stage.
All right. When WHO is recommending about a 40-second action as to what we all can do to prevent mental health issues, what are those rules? What can we all do?
You can add your voice to call on the government of your country to improve funding for mental health, improve funding to healthcare generally. There's a universal health coverage. Under universal health coverage, mental health is part of it. Under the SDGs, good health and well-being, mental health is part of it. If you add your voice, you would agree with me that one of the ways to compel government to act is by talking about issues consistently, leading peaceful campaigns. So what WHO and other health organizations are saying is that, look, join your voice. It's like a voice petition to say, hey, please, we need you to improve funding for mental health. If you improve funding for mental health, our facilities will be more equipped, more people will be able to practice, all right, and people will be able to afford healthcare in the country.
So, Lucia Francis, we need to leave it at this point. Thank you for your time on TVC Breakfast.
Thank you for having me.